Jenny, as we've got a quorum, I'll declare this meeting of the committee open. I advise that the meeting of the committee will be streamed live to the City of Adelaide website, and a recording will also be published to the internet. Please note that an audio and visual recording is being taken, and it means that your presence at and any contribution you make to the meeting may be collected, used, disclosed, or published publicly by the Council, including transferring outside of Australia. Council acknowledges that we are meeting on traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains and pays respect to elders past and present. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship with the land, and we acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. And of course, I make a similar acknowledgement if anyone is joining us from lands other than those of the Kaurna people. We also extend that respect to other Aboriginal language groups and First Nations who are present. Item 2, apologies and leave of absence. I have an apology from Councillor Moran. Jenny, were there any others?
No, none that we're aware of, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 3, confirmation of the minutes. Can I please have a mover and a seconder to move that they are a true and accurate record of the previous committee meeting? Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Seconded by Councillor Abrahimzadeh. Just a reminder, we have to use the virtual hand for moving and seconding. Councillor Knoll, do you wish to speak? Councillor Abrahimzadeh? Members? There being none, I put that to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your virtual hand. And those against? Councillor Martin, sorry, I don't think I saw your hand go up unless I missed it. Councillor Sims, okay. And those against? All right, that is carried. We'll move on. Obviously, item 4 on the Festival Plaza presentation was withdrawn, and that was given to us in a public briefing earlier. And so we go on to 4.2, a presentation on the cultural mapping project. And I believe Claire was going to kick us off with that one. And also, I'd just like to welcome Dennis O'Brien as well. Claire.
Thank you, Chair, Deputy Lord Mayor. I think I sent a note earlier this afternoon, and once again, my sincere apologies for the shortest report I have ever provided any council body in the history of my time here at the City of Adelaide. 2 words, cultural mapping. So I'm sorry about that. So tonight we're really fortunate to have Mr. Dennis O'Brien join us, and he's the grandson of Uncle Lewis O'Brien. He's a Kaurna and Narungga man. He holds a degree in anthropology and also works at the SA Museum. So contextually, we see Kaurna comment and their input on a regular basis for a whole range of different infrastructure projects, in particular in the city and parklands, and also when we're looking at reviewing any of our community land management plans, ensuring that we have some cultural context and information embedded within our policy documents is really important. And up until now, these queries and those consultations have always taken place on a case-by-case basis, and usually with Kaurna elders or community members. And that can take quite some time and doesn't usually capture a broader picture or allow any Kaurna cultural knowledge or information to be put into context over the long term. So the project that Dennis will be presenting tonight will help address some of those challenges. And we actually kicked off a piece of work on this, I reckon it was around 12 or 15 years ago, with James Hager and some of the early parklands policy documents. So I'll hand over to Christy now, who'll just give a little bit more information around the intent of the project, and then over to Dennis to just walk you through some of the work that's been undertaken to date. So thank you, Christy.
Thank you, Claire. Through the chair, I'm just to let you know that we're really delighted to have Dennis O'Brien with us, and that I think it's kind of timely in a sense to talk about very, very long-term history of Adelaide and surrounds and learn more about it. And the process of cultural mapping will be to provide a tool to identify and record the cultural assets and knowledge with implication of this knowledge then being used to preserve Kaurna culture. Previously in a reconciliation committee, Kaurna Elder Geoffrey Newchurch said that Kaurna cultural sites are not just, dots on maps, but cultural heritage is entwined through the whole of Kaurna country, and that the mapping is part of a healing process, and that it's also very much about connecting young Kaurna people and giving them a voice and a purpose and understanding the history of the area. So what's happened to date is that we've had 2 cultural mapping exercises, 2 cultural mapping workshops. At these workshops, 6 Kaurna youth worked with elders and an archaeologist to learn data and capture and document the methodology around what they were doing. Cultural mapping will be undertaken by trained cultural monitors, including, of course, now Dennis O'Brien. So the next stage is to enable the Kaurna to create, manage and own the register of Kaurna cultural sites. I guess with that context, and also I'd like to apologise for the brevity of the information you received. We knew it was a presentation, and so look forward to hearing more about it directly from Dennis. So I might ask Dennis to turn on his camera and address you.
Hopefully everyone can see me. My first time using Zoom, so here we go. So Ngā Māni everyone anyway, so hi in Kaurna. So just to give you a little bit of background in the cultural mapping, I was brought on board by Uncle Geoffrey Newchurch and Auntie Lynette Crocker, as well as Auntie Simpson, actually, Mel Simpson, who got me on board. We've given my Kaurna background and also anthropology background to get involved in the cultural mapping. So I've been actually on board for probably the last 2 weeks, and I haven't sort of known the background of what's happened up until now. So hearing and getting a few notes obviously is a good thing. So it sort of filled me in on what's happened previously. And last week, Auntie Mel asked me to come along and talk a little bit about what I've been doing. And this is cultural mapping, something that I've done in anthropology anyway, and worked with a lot of different Aboriginal groups right across South Australia. But obviously my particular interest is with Kaurna and Narungga people. So my own people in Adelaide Plains, as well as the Yorke Peninsula. And I did start actually working with the Yorke Peninsula, with the Narungga, with different councils, suburbs, towns within those areas. And so just to give you a little bit of an idea of what cultural mapping, which has already been commented, is, cultural mapping is a tool to identify and record cultural assets and knowledge of a particular area. These areas could be areas such as the River Torrens, could be the Mount Lofty Ranges, it could be burial sites, dreaming sites, so all of these types of things. So the level of detail that I go into is, well, it's a lot. There's general cultural mapping that's been done, but the level of detail I'll go into is a lot of it is secret information, which isn't readily available. There's a lot of research that's been done by non-Aboriginal academics with Aboriginal people, but I've got a lot of oral history stories which have been passed on from my grandfather to my dad, and from my uncles, and very close sort of family members, which hasn't been well known or well published. That will be included in a lot of the cultural mapping. But as far as people getting access to those sorts of things, that'll be up to people like senior elders like Uncle Geoffrey, Auntie Lynette, to see whether that can become available to people outside of Kaurna. But just to give you an idea of some of the detail and depth that I've gone into with a lot of this. So I look at, with cultural mapping, we look at a history of an area from an Aboriginal and a non-Aboriginal perspective. So we're using elders through oral history, and we're also using historians, academics from different universities that have different qualifications. So I'm looking at both oral and written with a lot of the cultural mapping. So we're looking at obviously the history of the area. We also look at clan groups within Kaurna, within the Kaurna nation, because clan groups, if you look at if you compare Ghana as a nation, so you look at Australia as a nation, you look at states within Australia as a nation, so clan groups are states basically within the Ghana nation, and there's not a lot known about them, and there's discussions around community, you know, who belongs to which clan group, who belongs, say, to who should be talking up for, you know, the River Torrens, Karawirapari, who should be talking up for people up north in Ghana, who should be talking south, and it becomes quite complex. So I'm even going into those areas now, which a lot is not known with clan groups within Ghana country. There's about 6 to 8 that we know of, and those I'm relying on a lot of historical sources as well as genealogies to show where families are actually coming from. And so we rely a lot on documented sources for those sorts of things, a lot of written sources. Burial sites, recorded and non-recorded. So there's burial sites that we know of that are on the ARD register. So the Aboriginal Reconciliation Department have a register of Aboriginal burials within South Australia, and also the museum where I'm currently working. The South Australian Museum has its own reburials, and it has its own register of remains that it has quite a lot of to do with Ghana and other Aboriginal groups. So that's another area that I'm looking at to record as part of the cultural mapping. Cultural stories that run through country. So a lot of people know of the Chilbrookie story, which runs through, you know, really well known in Warraparinga. So if anyone knows the area of, you know, near Crossroads, Sturt Road, that area is Warraparinga. That's where the story of Chilbrookie sort of starts and runs along the southern coast. But there's a lot of other stories that people aren't quite aware of. There's stories that have been written and published, and there's oral stories which have been passed on and they're not widely known. And so there's significant stories in areas which people may not be aware of. And a lot of the time we get councils or areas that come to Ghana and want to know if they want to build infrastructure, do certain projects, and they may not be aware of other cultural stories that run through country. So part of this cultural mapping is capturing as many of those as I can. And some of these stories run through a number of councils. So it's a matter of, and the way I've listed it is actually under councils, suburbs, and any information within those areas. So we're working with the Adelaide City Council or the Onkaparinga Council or whoever it may be. I'll have information. If they're looking at working in a particular suburb, I can grab that information straight away and look at significant stories, place names, oral history to do with those areas. And that is all, again, part of the cultural mapping. Men's and women's sites. So if a lot of people may know of the obvious women's site, which is Onkaparinga, or what we call Nunkiparinga, which is the women's river down south. So that's a well-known women's site, which is pretty public. But again, there's other men's and women's sites that aren't public knowledge, and they'll be ones that I'll be recording down. Again, it depends on what infrastructure or what project might come up where we can actually get women or men, it might be, to talk about a certain area, or, you know, and see how much information they can actually give across. Because there might be information that they say, we don't mind if this is talked about and public knowledge, but there might be other information where they go, no, we don't want this to be public. And as we know with places like with the Hindmarsh Island Bridge case, there's some areas where we have to go into, unfortunately, a lot more detail than we would like for oral stories that we've kept for a long time. So these things I'll be documenting, but as far as who sees that information, it'll be very much at the discretion of elders, and depending on what sort of project we're involved in, what council we're working with, what needs to be done, who needs to know what on a need-to-know basis, sort of thing. So that's other things I'll be capturing. So cultural stories, men's, women's sites, significant animals, totems, moieties from a particular clan area. They're always things that people would like to know. Just to give you an example, Tundanyunga, so red kangaroo rock dreaming, that's in the centre of the city of Adelaide. the totem, the red kangaroo, is really well known and really a strong totem for Kaurna people. It may not be widely known through Adelaide. There might be some people that know a little bit about that or a little bit about that story. But those sorts of things I think are great to get people that are non-Aboriginal to understand that story and know it. And you know, some people might be born and bred in Adelaide and grown up, but not know a lot of these quite common stories and things, and they'll appreciate Kaurna country a lot more knowing these sorts of things. So again, that sort of thing will be incorporated in the cultural mapping. So resources from any area that we might have, so that'll be documented. So where we used to get red ochre from Ochre Cove, so that would be one that would definitely come in. Flora, fauna, ochre, springs, waterways, clothing, weapons, tools, that's all incorporated in what I'm gathering, the data that I'm gathering. Massacre, conflict sites are always areas that are significant to Aboriginal people and Kaurna people. So those sorts of things I'll be documenting. Kaurna language and place names of the area, which you learn actually a lot from just a place name, a Kaurna place name. You can learn a hell of a lot just knowing that. Genealogies, like I said, I'll be going into a lot of genealogies prior to 1836, linking those up, and it will be very important for Kaurna people's identity and also people to speak for a certain place on Kaurna country to know they have that connection to those people and that clan group. That's really important to know. So historical paintings and photographs I'll be gathering, and GIS mapping tools are used a lot for a lot of this information. So, and even contemporary sites. So you probably know of Jack Buckskin that does a lot of work with the Kaurna language, but he also does a lot of traditional type methods of shield collection from the Adelaide city areas. So he might go into the parklands and with permission, you know, cut a bark shield. So that tree that he's cutting that shield from becomes actually a significant tree in a sense, and significant to Kaurna people because it's part of our traditional practice, which is still continued on today. So a lot of those things people become wary of, and culture that was in the past has now become culture that is in the now and going into the future. So, and I should actually make the point as well that everything that's on Kaurna land in the first instance, and they're all should be considered significant to Kaurna people, all of it. So anything on Kaurna land is significant to Kaurna people. A lot of sites could be, you know, could vary in significance, but the whole of Kaurna country is we always want to be involved in what's going on there on Kaurna country. So just to give you an example, so people know some of the work that we're doing. So just to give you an example of a place name like to do with the River Torrens. So our word is Karawera-Parry. So that's a red gum forest river. So that tells you historically the Karawera-Parry, the River Torrens, was a red gum forest. So historically that whole area along the Torrens, especially through the city of Adelaide, was just surrounded by red gums. You can go through old historical resources that were written from 1836 onwards that tell you how thick that area was and people cutting through that area. And it's unbelievable. You look at the parklands today, but it was really thick with river red gums and other native trees and wildlife. There was kangaroos everywhere, red kangaroos running through those areas now. So back then, and I even saw a thing on the news just recently where there was another kangaroo running back through that area. So it's amazing. So they still have that connection to that area. Linguistically, it tells us it's a Kaurna name. So Karawera-Parry, which was recorded very early on, you can tell that Kaurna people lived there in that area because it is undoubtedly a Kaurna name, Karawera-Parry. Also tells us what we're likely to find along the river and the waterway. So, for example, a lot of our people, when they passed away, unfortunately, they would be buried along waterways or streams, not close enough that it would pollute or affect the water quality, but a lot of soft sand. So a lot of our people were historically buried along the River Torrens, so, you know, so many meters back from the River Torrens, same along beachfronts, so many meters back from beachfronts. So those sorts of things, they'll tell you straight away that they're significant areas. Freshwater, again, you know, you look across the Adelaide Plains, there's not a lot of fresh water. So rivers like Karawira-Parry, River Torrens was very culturally significant to our people. And so they used to gather a large amount of fresh water from it, would be yabbying, fishing, all sorts of things, living off what that river produced. The river is also, there's a story to do with the river, which is, and our name for, well, our name for the River Torrens is Karawira-Parry, but it's a reflection of the Wadley-Parry, which is a house river, the Milky Way. So we call the Milky Way Wadley-Parry, and it's a reflection of the River Torrens in the sky. So our people used to use the stars, the stars from the Milky Way to navigate at night. And the River Torrens was used to navigate along. So they'd know by looking at the stars whereabouts they were along the River Torrens. So it was historically very significant to our people. Oral and written sources, you know, tell us the river historically was a meeting place for Kaurna people, for Kaurna clans, for other Aboriginal people to come and meet and trade.
Brian, sorry, Brian. Just in the interests of time, we'll give you a couple more minutes before I've got to open it up for questions.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no worries. I'm just trying to get through. I didn't know how long I'd go for. Sorry about that. I know there's because there's a lot of information. Yeah. So oral and so I've just gone through the oral written sources, but there's sites along the River Torrens because the River Torrens, Karawira-Parry is such a long river. You've got certain sites are women's and certain sites of men's. So knowing that information also indicates who you should talk to, who you should be talking to about a certain area. Many of these factors lead to not only that, but you know, talking to academics to find out whether a certain area, place name is a Kaurna name, which linguists are really good at telling you, you know, with pretty strong certainty whether a place is a Kaurna place. So those sorts of things. So why is all this information important? So just before we get to questions, it's important to me, it's important to our people. It is all to do with Kaurna identity, who we are, our sense of belonging. Having opportunities for Kaurna people to get involved in learning more about their culture, their language and their history. And for non-Aboriginal people, it's a chance to be involved in reconciliation, learning from Kaurna people more about, you know, the country you live on and knowing your history prior to 1836. So that was, the crux of what I wanted to cover. But is there any questions now?
Thank you, Brian, for that. We'll go to the Lord Mayor first. A reminder to put your hands up if you ask questions or make comment.
I don't have any real questions, Dennis. I just wanted to say thank you. We had a presentation at the Reconciliation Committee that I co-chair with Auntie Yvonne Aegis, and it's a project that we are keeping, you know, a close eye on because we think it's such an important thing for us through the Reconciliation Committee, but more so for the City of Adelaide to actually have that knowledge and be able to share it with our members and with the community. So thank you very much for the work that you're doing. It's fantastic. We had a language lesson from Jack last year.
Oh, excellent.
And we've got some more. Once we come out the other side of COVID, we'll continue with some language lessons just so that we can try and get a bit more language in our everyday as well, which, you know, has gone down very well, actually. Us being able to just even say a few words in language makes all the difference, I think. So thanks for your work.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Donovan.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that, Dennis. That was amazingly comprehensive. I now feel I have a much clearer understanding of the project Just a quick one. You mentioned that, of course, some of the information is shareable and some of it is not shareable, depending on the context and the project and to whom the information potentially could be shared. Will there be any broad layer that's accessible to the public so that they know, for example, if there's an intention to do a type of project or a project in a certain location, they can, click on it or access it in some way to see where to start, even if it's not getting access to all of the layers of information that might be underneath that?
Yeah, definitely. There'll be a general, like I said, general knowledge that most of it, what will be public is already public, but it's in so many different places and people don't really know where to go for all the information. I mean, I've just looked at certain Ghana history, language and culture, and you might look through, I don't know, 20, 30 books to try and find everything about a particular area. But my goal is to put it all in one area so people can just go to one particular area and find it all. If they want the more in-depth, obviously and even in-depth public knowledge will be put there as well. But if they want secret sacred, well then that obviously wouldn't be available unless it was approved by Uncle Jeffrey or Auntie Lynette or whoever was involved in giving the okay for it, or my grandfather or whoever it might be.
And you might have said this and I might have missed it, but is it anticipated that it will be presented on a certain website, or what will be that forum, or is that not yet decided, yet to be decided?
Yeah, not yet decided.
No, it's easy. Next step. But
definitely, I mean, that would be my own personal goal. I'd love it to be accessible by everyone, because every time I've been involved in cultural training, cultural awareness training a lot as well with my uncle Michael, who does Ghana cultural awareness training. I get asked a lot of questions which to me are quite common knowledge, but I wish there was a way that people could access a lot of this stuff online and all in one area, and it was easily accessible. And a lot of our people have no problem with non-Aboriginal people learning. They actually encourage it and want people to get involved, and the same with language, learning language. And I was glad to hear that from the Lord Mayor that Jack Buckskin's involved in teaching Ghana language, because he's someone we all, as Ghana people idolise. He's a young Ghana man who's going to be an elder very quickly because of his passion around language. And that's the people we want involved. And Jack got involved when he was really young in the language movement, and it changed his whole course, for his life. Like he'll even admit, it's something that is so strong for us with identity, that if you get young Ghana people involved in a lot of these projects, mental, because some of us suffer, depression, all sorts of things, mental illnesses. It's a good way it's a positive way and of getting away from that, and actually getting involved in language, culture, history for our young people to be passionate and confident and know who they are is something we're all really striving to. And it's something that, my pop was really, pushed me to be involved in it because of those reasons. And, Jack, teaching language is, we need more Jacks. Yeah. So this sort of thing will get more Ghana people involved in it. In learning language, history, culture, all of those sorts of things as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Dennis.
No worries.
Thank you, Helen. Are there any other questions or comments from anyone? No, there being none. Well, Brian, I just want to, sorry, Dennis.
That's all right.
I just want to thank you as well for the work that you're doing. I must admit, before I came to council, I had no idea what cultural mapping was, but now I do. I'm very pleased that we're doing it, and I'm very keen to see further results of it. I think it's incredibly fascinating stuff. It's very relevant. And it's just so important that we have all of this documented, lest we risk losing it. So thank you for the work that you're continuing to do. And thank you, Claire and Christy. Sorry, I'm looking at you on my screen while I'm speaking to you, just wondering. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that, members, we'll move on to item 4.3, which is our workshop on the action plans, otherwise known as master plans, or the action plans for the master plans for Melbourne, O'Connell and Hutt Street. Clinton is going to tee us off on this one. Jenny, if you could just unmute Clinton. Done. Welcome. Thank you, Clinton.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and thanks, Lord Mayor and elected members, through you, Chair. Just wanted to draw members' attention to the information pack given to you this week, just in regards to the master plan approach. And what you will see through that pack of information is quite a different approach to master plans. This is actually very deliberate, and it might be a bit different to what you're used to seeing. So that'll be the nexus of our presentation tonight to you. The approach to HUTT, O'Connell and Melbourne Street will definitely follow the successful approach we've applied to the recent Hindley Street project. Most importantly, things such as appointing a single point of contact for internal and external stakeholders and regular communications to ensure all stakeholders see that continued progress in the streets. Having a highly involved and engaged group of stakeholders representative of the broader area, which has enabled us to get a clear focus on the opportunities, but also have the ability to have open and frank discussions about the issues in each of the main streets and to work together on those outcomes. The idea of establishing a Lord Mayor's Roundtable, which has been a really great success on Hindley Street. Having a holistic approach to precinct improvement. So in this regard, what we mean is our efforts are targeted at the specific concerns of the public and communicated as one project, which means we're actually able to bring together and share more of what we're actually doing in the street, which can include some of our business as usual activities, but it's something that the public then gets to see and own. And of course, delivering the quick wins for the stakeholders in the community with minimal expenditure. So I'll now pass on to Shanti and Grace to deliver the presentation on the work achieved to date, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have following the presentation.
Thanks, Clinton.
Thank you.
Shanti and Grace, welcome. Okay, there you go, Shanti.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and thank you, Clinton, for the intro. Grace and I are going to present tonight, and as Clinton has already alluded to, the approach that we have actively taken with these three streets is not to deliver to you what has been a methodology that's been used in the past, which is to draw up beautiful plans that often cost a lot of money to deliver. The approach that we've been using has actually been quite a new way of working for us internally. And I'd just like to share with you some of the things that we've been doing to achieve what we have so far. So right from the outset, we proactively thought about how on earth can we deliver Main Street improvements for these three streets without coming back into council and saying it's going to be $3 million for O'Connell Street or $5 million for Hutt Street. And so we thought, how can we peel this thing back and create something that's different? And so whilst Grace has taken the lead in undertaking this work, Grace has not been able to undertake this work without the assistance of literally every single person within the business. And so to that end, what we did right from the get-go was actually to appoint project sponsors for each of the streets. And so what we've done is we've got project sponsors in 3 ADs. So Hutt Street is being led by Christy Anthony, and she is supported by an external lead who assists her. So Chandler Giles from her team is the external facing person for Hutt Street. For Melbourne Street, we have Matt Morrissey and Sue McKenzie from the Economic Development team. And O'Connell Street is being led by yours truly, and I'm supported ably by Rachel Tassoni, and Rachel Tassoni obviously belongs to the property team, and her connection into 88 O'Connell Street is obviously the natural fit in O'Connell Street. In the vein of the Hindley Street model, we have an external, what we call a single point of contact, and Jennifer Brenton from Matthew Morrissey's team is that person. So we are really using the model that was established in Hindley Street because of the value that that has brought to Hindley Street, and we believe that the similar value will be brought to these 3 streets using that same approach. Clinton did mention the question of the Lord Mayor's Roundtable. We are at this point looking at Lord Mayor's Roundtable approach for HUTT Street only, simply because HUTT Street is quite a complex street with quite different issues compared to the other 2. But we will keep that on the table depending on what other knowledge we come to in relation to O'Connell Street and Melbourne Street. I'll start going through the slides. So the 3 things that we're looking at is looking at public space improvements, the key question about business positioning, and the other question about stakeholder engagement. All of the work that Grace has been undertaking in the business has been informed by a whole bundle of research and analysis. There's been a whole bundle of stakeholder engagement that we've been drawing from as well. And so in doing the work that's been done, we've been able to identify some short, medium and long-term actions which we will be presenting to you, together with a budget a request coming into you in June 2020. So that's what our timeline looks like, ready to go for the new financial year. And of course, we'd like to get some input from council on the approach that we're taking. And I guess things have changed in the last few weeks, and so what COVID-19 means going forward, and whether we need to be perhaps repositioning or refocusing some of the things that we were considering prior to this COVID event taking hold and running away from us. So the things we are looking at, just to give you some, I guess, line of sight of the thinking, is some immediate things that we think can be undertaken, and that's within the framework of existing priorities and existing funding that we have. Some quick wins that we think we can be looking at, and some of the things that we are looking at is utilisation of technology. For example, we did have a session with members in late March, and one of the suggestions was that we look at the use of technology to support businesses come out of COVID. And to that end, we are just looking at what those opportunities might be, and then looking at the 1 to 3 year, the 3 to 5 and the 5+ years, which might be some of the more expensive options. So on that note, I'm just going to hand over to Grace, who will be able to talk you through each street and what discoveries we've had.
Thank you, Shanti. So for this presentation today, we'll focus on the quick wins, and particularly the priority quick wins that we have been in recent times for your feedback. So there's a number of key drivers that are common to all 3 streets, which have necessitated these action plans. So prior to COVID-19, they had already been affected by the changing local retail climate caused by static population growth, deregulation of shop trading hours, and increased suburban competition. So including competition from inner suburbs who have been investing quite heavily in their shopping and their retail precincts like Burnside, Prospect, Hyde Park and Norwood. Global influences have also transformed consumer behaviours with a significant move towards online shopping. And so main streets as retail precincts are no longer day-to-day necessity, but are becoming more of a leisure experience where a range of other offerings such as food, entertainment, cultural experiences, opportunities to socialise and other specialist services are also now expected. According to 2019 statistics, high vacancy rates of between 11 and 16% were recorded across the three main streets that we're looking at today, compared to 10% citywide. And we're also seeing quite high churn rates as well on these streets. Generally, the business and retail offering lack diversity and unique offerings, and the main streets lack clear and identifiable branding to set the individual streets apart from others. The streets are long with a short or small central core and activity that dissipates beyond this core and is dispersed along the length of the street. There are tensions between parking, traffic and movement modes. All streets see relatively high traffic volumes and are used as commuter routes during peak periods. And from engagement on related recent projects within the last 3 to 5 years and the data analysis that we've undertaken as part of this project, we're seeing that there's tension between the parking needs of traders and workers who tend to want more longer term parks and expectations of residents and visitors who tend to need less parking, shorter term parking and are happy to walk further. The traffic volume, speed and congestion and extent of parking on the streets can affect the experience of the street. Its scale, its sense of intimacy, how pleasant and relaxing a walking and shopping environment they may be, and can compromise the ability to accommodate other active functions such as outdoor dining, places for people to socialise when safe to do so, for events, delightful public art and additional greening. All of these streets have significant heritage places, state and local heritage places, and prestigious buildings at key intersections that could be celebrated further through facade restorations and accent lighting. The street infrastructure on all three streets is generally in good condition. The paving, street furniture and greening are generally well maintained and have many more years of asset life remaining. Though through recent engagement, we're seeing some comments around the streets being tired or outdated. And we also see some further greening opportunities that could be pursued on all of these streets. So looking at the priority quick wins, so for the ones that we're seeing that we could deliver within the first quarter of the next financial year. For all three streets, we're looking at decluttering. So working with traders to remove fixed outdoor dining furniture in line with our City of Adelaide guidelines, removing inappropriate or underutilised signage, street furniture and bus stops, activating vacant shop fronts through the Splash program, looking at skinning and creating engaging frontages with local artists, and working with Renew Adelaide to fill vacant tenancies and support local enterprises. Improving shop fronts through the Shopfront Improvement Scheme to work on building presentation, signage, lighting. Perhaps there are shops that just need a new lick of paint and a tidy up. Improving intersections and calming traffic. So prioritising safe and accessible, walkable main streets where people want to gather, to meander and to explore. Temporary urban interventions and activations. We're looking to test some of the longer term thinking that we could do through through the Splash program to test with the stakeholders and the community through interventions, through activations, through art installations and events, to feed into the next set of short-term and quick wins. A deep clean and maintenance through all the streets wherever needed, repairing any damaged pavers, pram ramps, pruning or refreshing vegetation, and improving accessibility. Installing new drinking fountains, installing atmospheric lighting to improve the nighttime experience, safety and appeal of the streets, and to also support the nighttime economy. Create more opportunities for greening, more planter boxes, and investigating also some new potential green public space destinations on the streets. Developing a digital presence, so building on Shanti's comments around working with the technology that's available today to look at marketing campaigns to celebrate the unique offerings for each of the streets. And that will also be guided by a business and retail strategy, which is currently being undertaken and will consider the current impacts and recovery from COVID-19. So to the individual streets now. Oops, okay. I'll run through a little bit of background, a high level, some of the high level analysis that we've seen on each of the streets and the unique additional priority quick wins that we're proposing for your feedback today. So HUTT Street is valued for its green local village charm as a friendly, relaxed place that attracts and serves its local residents and visitors who value the hospitality and business mix. There are mature plane trees in the verges and the centre median, which characterise the street. There are social and safety concerns expressed through negative media attention associated with the HUTT Street Centre. But also it's worth noting that according to SAPOL, HUTT Street accounts for less than 2% of reported crime in the CBD. There are street renewals and enhancements planned. Design is currently underway this year to renew tree surrounds, road surface, garden beds and pram ramps, with staged construction currently planned for to be constructed over the next 4 to 5 years. Major developments are planned or underway within a 10-minute walk of HUTT Street. There's over $450 million worth of development, including over 1,500 apartments, which will see a growing population in this southeast area, approximately 40 odd % growth over the next 20 years. So in addition to the actions proposed for all streets, for HUTT Street in particular, we're proposing that we install shopfront lighting, which could be of a decorative nature, but is quite consistent across all of the shopfronts in the core Main Street area between just south of Halifax Street and just north of Carrington Street, to improve the nighttime presence of the street to visitors and also passers-by, to prune the heavy canopies of the trees to improve path lighting and safety to the dark spots, feature lighting to the centre medians to colour wash the trees and just draw the eye up to enhance the trees further in the evening. To commence the build of the stage 1 renewal and street enhancements that I described previously. We also had an idea that a greening competition in this area would be fantastic to improve and to foster innovation in private greening and the contribution of private greening to the public realm. We're also interested in improving the connections through the parklands to HUTT Street, particularly from the south side, with better pedestrian paths, that are well lit and accessible. There's a number of heritage buildings which could benefit from facade restoration, and we'll investigate how this can be enacted through the Heritage Incentive Scheme. For O'Connell Street, this was once Adelaide's key dining and entertainment street, with cafes, restaurants and pubs and the Piccadilly Cinema. It is still a good foodie destination, but its identity has been diluted, and there is a lack of diversity in retail and other commercial offerings day and night. And based on recent engagement, it is seen to be tired and in need of a contemporary makeover. The upper North Adelaide area where O'Connell Street is located has the highest residential population in the city. However, 90% of spending on the street is from visitors outside of the city and outside of North Adelaide, particularly from the inner northern suburbs such as Prospect. O'Connell Street is a major north-south arterial road which services over 32,000 vehicles per day under normal circumstances, and is well serviced by buses. It's very wide with 4 lanes and parking to both sides. So it's the design of the road very much favours its use as an arterial road, but this impacts on the desired experience of the main street. Intersections at Barton Terrace West, Gover Street and Ward Street, where there are filtered right-hand turns, are known crash hotspots, and any changes to the function of the road or improvements to intersections could really open up some great opportunities for the public realm to improve pedestrian safety and the experience. The future 88 O'Connell is a key development opportunity to build what could be a fantastic community heart at the core of the street. Specific priority quick wins for O'Connell Street are installing atmospheric lighting at the northern and southern entrances. This could be in a temporary way to test the longer term thinking and to welcome visitors to the street and passers-by to support both the recovery and the nighttime economy in future. We're also interested in improving the Parklands connections, noting that a lot of the visitors to O'Connell Street are coming from the northern suburbs, so improving the walking and biking trails through Park 2 and Park 4 particularly would also benefit O'Connell Street. And Melbourne Street was once the centre of fashion, retail, but has declined in this area by about a third between 2008 and 2014. And Melbourne Street now lacks this identity. What we're seeing today is a specialist medical and professional services focus at the western end, with a centre of activity focused around the Jerningham Street intersection and a fine grain of cafe dining as the main attraction just east of Jerningham Street. Like O'Connell Street, there is a much higher visitor than local spend, but also Melbourne Street is in a particularly challenging position as it's also competing with O'Connell Street for trade. There are relatively high traffic and bus volumes, creating noise and congestion and affecting air quality, and there are a few dedicated pedestrian crossings. There is a static and small local residential population, but with a high proportion of students and young people living in this area. The future of the Women's and Children's Hospital site is a major opportunity for the street and could significantly impact the visitation and character of Melbourne Street in the long term. So the additional priority quick wins that we're looking at for Melbourne Street are temporary entry statements at the east and west ends of the street to herald the entries and welcome visitors to the street. There were 25 new trees that were planted as part of an enhancement project in 2019, and we're looking to further enhance the greening on the street by installing vines to a number of the unused arbours to provide further shading. There was a customer request to improve pedestrian safety at the western end of Melbourne Street, particularly around Ronald McDonald House. So we would be investigating the design of the Wombat Crossing as part of the first quarter action. Okay, so for us, we prior to COVID-19, so towards the end of March, we were looking to engage with the precinct groups and the traders on the atmospheric lighting ideas and to set up the HUTT Street Reference Group or Lord Mayor's Roundtable. And we're still intending to bring a council report back to you in June. I guess with the COVID-19 restrictions, we'll be reviewing our engagement approach. So that includes the atmospheric lighting piece. And we're also looking at engaging with key stakeholders, but we will come back to you with our approach to that. We're also holding and reviewing our immediate actions, which we were looking to deliver through the Splash program this financial year, and we'll come back to you with an update. Okay. So I think Shanti was going to speak to these. Shanti, you there? Okay.
To be thank you. Thanks, Jenny. So I guess the key things that we're just keen to get some feedback from council on are those two things. The project approach, you know, whether you've got any views on the approach that we've taken and whether there's other stuff that you think we should be doing or things we should be doing. And then the other question is obviously on COVID and thoughts on how we move forward with this project once we have some light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you, Shanti. Members, there must be a considerable amount of feedback on this. Councillor Martin first. Over to you, Phil.
Yeah, look, a couple of questions. Now, I can see that there's been a lot of work done pre-COVID-19 and that, according to the administration, a lot is now on hold, including Splash and immediate plans. So is it being put to us that the master plan, which is clearly reduced now to quick wins, is it being put to us that these quick wins too are on hold at this stage because of council's financial problems flowing from COVID-19?
Winton or Shanti, whoever.
Through the chair, there's 2 points to Councillor Martin's question. we're not just doing a set of quick wins. We are actually looking at each street within the entire gamut of what we can do immediately, what we can do in the short term, and then what the longer term might need to look like going forward. So we're being quite methodical for each of the streets to identify what we can do in an immediate effect, what we can do going forward in a 3 to 6 month type window, and then whatever else we might be able to do within a 12-month time frame, 2-year time frame, and so on. So I'd just like to just clarify that point. Insofar as COVID is concerned, there will be some things that we had thought we might be able to do, such as having markets and those sorts of things on the streets where we could have gatherings of people with events and those sorts of things. Clearly, COVID has required us to rethink and reconsider those opportunities. That doesn't mean we aren't thinking about what other opportunities might be possible. And so the point that Grace has raised around, encouraging businesses to either, repaint their facades, or us working with them to provide heritage incentives funds to upgrade their shop fronts, or whether it's working with businesses for businesses to think about how differently they can be undertaking their business, through to removal of street furniture on the street, decluttering and the like. Those things actually cost very little money. So those things do need to continue to occur. What we do need to think about, however, is how we engage with the community and businesses in this current COVID environment. I'm pretty positive that we will see some light at the end of the tunnel, where we will be able to actually do an engagement, whether it's through a virtual network or some other methodology. So I'm confident that we can actually start delivering some things pretty quickly.
Well, I guess I'm trying to get a sense of whether those things that are a bit more costly, like lighting, as is proposed for Melbourne and O'Connell Street entrances, might have to go on hold because of the financial strictures.
Through the chair, certainly that is something that we will need to think about, but ultimately it is a decision that council will be presented with for a decision to be made.
Okay, and the papers refer to an allocation of $370,000 for the 3 precincts. Has that money been expended, or is there a large part of that remaining, or half of it remaining, or?
Through the chair, $370,000 was allocated through the IBP for the 3 streets. I need to take it on notice to tell you exactly what is left. A large proportion of money is still available. That money has been quarantined to deliver what we can deliver for the 3 streets. So it hasn't been given up as part of the savings.
Okay. And I wonder also if the administration might distribute to us the contact details of the people who've been given particular responsibilities for particular streets.
Through the chair, Jen Brereton is the external contact, and she is the person I can certainly share that through to members tomorrow.
And the internal contacts as well for those members who would like to have a discussion with individuals, if that's possible.
Certainly.
Okay, and one other question. Remind me once more what the difference is between a wombat and a zebra?
Grace, can you help?
Okay. So a wombat is a raised crossing. So it, on Melbourne Street where there is significant traffic volumes, we would need a raised hump in the road to slow the traffic. A zebra crossing is flush with the road surface, which is painted on the road surface.
But the same rules apply in terms of vehicles stopping for pedestrian traffic.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I just add another point through to the question of, what does get spent or doesn't get spent and when? I think one of the things that we do have an opportunity to think about going forward in terms of keeping businesses afloat and supporting our communities post-COVID is, do these three streets present an opportunity to reimagine what the three streets could be going forward? Because the other thing, of course, to be aware of is in this COVID environment, the whole retailing environment has changed considerably, and how indeed some of those spaces continue to be occupied will be something that does come into question potentially with large vacancies arising. And that is something that we have not had the opportunity to turn our minds to. So the whole question of reimagination and re-imaging these places is something that we will need to think about in a bit more depth.
Thank you. And if I could just make a comment, Chair.
Yep.
Look, I just want to endorse those comments that the whole retail environment has changed. I've been walking through the city this week, just looking at the number of businesses that have signs in the windows saying permanently closed, and it's quite disturbing. Moreover, and I note that some of the administration's previous thinking has been about apartment development, and as we now know, it is very likely that there will be a real estate crash across the whole of the country, and that it will impact savagely on cities like Adelaide, which have substantial apartment and other residential developments underway. So these circumstances have changed dramatically, and I don't think that our ratepayers would be too upset if we took the opportunity to draw breath and just have a look at what the environment is now. But I would ask that if there is to be some movement forward, that we do try to treat all of the precincts equally. And I do recognise that there is a desire to help HUTT Street with a Lord Mayor's roundtable or similar. But I would ask that similar priority is given to other areas who will see their need, their problems as no less complex, no less deserving of attention than another precinct. And there is some urgency also in respect of O'Connell Street, where people I've been speaking to now have grave concerns about whether the street can survive, what will happen in respect of 88 O'Connell Street, if anything happens, and who remind me consistently that a master plan for O'Connell Street was in the City of Adelaide strategic plan for 2016-20. It is in our plan for 2020-24, and now we have, I think, a very limited capacity to deliver much. So it is important that we make people feel that we are considerate of their particular needs, no one precinct over another.
Thank you, Councillor. Next, I have Councillor Kira. There we go.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, mute tag. Thank you. Look. Thanks for the presentation. I think you're doing a very good job. I will just briefly relay the feedback that I've received from constituents. The priorities that traders, particularly along HUTT Street, traders and residents have articulated to me. I would say, firstly, really clearly foremost in their view is lighting. Lighting. So it's good to see that the lighting options you have identified are front and centre. They want the dark spaces lit in some shape or form. They don't mind if it's creative, if it's low budget, but this is really the predominant feedback I'm receiving at the outset. The second big item they've identified is they would like to see, they want to be reassured that any changes will not see any net reduction in parking spaces. That's their second big concern. The other thing that's been put forward, perhaps more than anything else, is the possibility of security cameras and signage indicating that security cameras are operating. That's the unfiltered feedback that I've received from constituents. So I just want to put that to you at this stage. Other than that, I'm looking forward greatly to the updates. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Jesse. Councillor Donovan.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think the approach is great, particularly because of the ideas around integrating across different strategies. So of course, the infrastructure is so important, but also integrating things like the business and retail strategy. And Shanti, I think your comment about reimagining the streets and how we can look at helping the different streets to develop some kind of identity without getting too caught up in, I think sometimes there can be a perception that that sort of work is too time consuming and too labour intensive and doesn't necessarily yield outcomes that people are wanting. But I think that is going to be so important to look at how we can use the engagement strategy that will be a part of this to not only update businesses with everything that's available to them already in terms of the business as usual, shopfront, 10 gig, all of those sorts of things, but then also to look at through that engagement process, dispelling some of the myths that perpetuate around what are going to lead to, you know, upticks in retail and upticks in hospitality, because I think still in talking to a lot of the retailers, it appears that there's still some thinking around, you know, if we just do the lighting or if we just do the pavers, then that's going to lead to this significant shift in improving the expenditure in the area. But if we can look at things holistically and look at how, for example, whatever comes out of things like the city access strategy, build that in together and try and bring traders along that journey so that we can potentially build capacity in their knowledge as well, so that they are, of course, not only participating in the decision making, but also building their own knowledge around, you know, what some of our business experts know actually works, particularly around some of the features of urban design that will support higher retail expenditure, and linking that in with the digital strategy and what we can do to support them to get online and those sorts of things. I think that makes a lot of sense rather than just looking at physical infrastructure on its own. So yes to the approach, and in terms of whether or not we continue to prioritise this through COVID, accepting that, of course, lots of hard decisions are going to need to be made. You know, I think that this piece of work is really important, given businesses are going to be needing that support to get back on track after this.
Thank you, Helen. Shanti, was there any need to respond to that? No, not this one. Excellent. Councillor Knoll.
Oh, Ruby. And again, yes, thank you very much for the approach, because I think bringing all of the stakeholders with you is one of the critical issues of making these things successful, because we don't know what the end will look like, because particularly in this case, I think the outcome could be quite interesting and different simply because of the circumstances, and the conversations around roundtables and such is really important, and like working through the precinct groups as always to connect. I think critical in all of this is also the various landlords, because they need to be front and center, because we're trying to create infrastructure around destinations, and I think and that's one of the major issues that we have, that enabling landlords to visualize what that is about, what the new tenant will look like, but it also is very critical about understanding what the precinct will become. And yeah, with all these difficult times and obviously the large numbers of vacancies, etc., we have an opportunity to reset what we're doing with the public and consumers, etc. So, you know, I always say the redevelopment of a street and so starts from behind the windows of the businesses that you're working from. And so working out with the strengths of each precinct, because I think, and this is, as others have said, this is an opportunity to work with every section of the council, because it is about growth. It is about identifying opportunities. It is understanding which sort of businesses will fit into a precinct area and what infrastructure we'd like to have to make those places inviting and all the rest. So I think it is critical that we're using this process, that as we re-engage the public and consumers with the city, and we have a hard job ahead of us because they're all gone local, they're all gone online, and there are certainly lots of discussions around bringing the online into a lot of the smaller businesses, and our council can have a role in that, in assisting sort of putting sort of these things in place, or enabling businesses to be able to do this well in the small from the smaller businesses, because they're the ones who are going to carry the greatest benefit for the community as a whole. As I say, I've appreciated the great difficulties in that, but again, that's what we have, and I think our job now is that we look at what is it we're going to do, how are we going to engage with all the people around us. I mean, the wider community, well, they're the ones who are going to determine by our actions as we re-engage with them. That's a lot through growth and through whatever other levers that we bring them to the city, and we start to get them to interact with the various precincts, with what they actually deliver, so that we can cement a particular character for each. And I think the most important part is that, as you said already, that jointly with all the various components of council, do we need to push this forward, because we have the opportunity to re-engage and bring people along, and we have to introduce them again to the city that will be. And it unfolds with their feeling and with their participation. And if we don't do that, then it's just going to be a nice street you travel down occasionally, but it won't connect with them. And I think all this is now, it's quite complicated, and I think it's going to be quite challenging for the council. But at least you're building up the you're leaving the money intact. You're going to start to engage and use money in ways that helps to bring up what you're trying to do. And let's face it, we can't go with a quick approach with a lot because there isn't that much available, but at least you can have continuously a city that's now looking more and more appealing because people have reacted to it. I think that's a really important component as well.
Thank you, Franz. We've now got Councillor Kouros.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say also that the amount of work that has gone into it, it's been great and it's been fantastic, and I truly appreciate all of that. And you've actually captured where the streets are and where they've been really well. I guess it's a question now of where we're going to go now, because I think the COVID has actually, it's going to change the consumer a lot for the future, and the way we do things, the way we're going to be traveling in our streets, the way we're going to go shopping, all of that is changing. So I guess I understand the quick wins and the medium wins and the long-term goals in the process of it all, because it allows us the opportunity to be able to work through that and how the consumer's changed. I do take on board the fact that, there are a lot of businesses that probably have closed permanently or might be coming back. We don't know during this COVID, and we don't know what our city is going to be like in recovery. However, I don't really think it's something that we need to, I think it's something that we need to work through quite quickly. I would hate to see us pausing. We do the quick wins, and then we have this really long pause, and then we don't get on with it. It's really important that our city is, open for business, and that the council is participating a lot with our main streets and making sure that we are moving forward. And in doing so, we do need that interaction with the landlords as well as the businesses. And the business community, the commercial sector, makes up a large part of our rates in our city. And so it's important to say that we're sending the message across that our city is open for business. And I really think that this is a really important part of our budget, and we really need to stick through it and really spend that time in knowing what our main streets identity will be. I also love the use of, you talked about technology, you touched on that. I really would love to have an integration app so people know what is on those main streets, and you know, people are time poor, or we're becoming accustomed to using our phones. So if people want to shop in a particular precinct, they can have it on their hand, on their phone. I love that idea, and I think we should integrate that a lot more, and be able to maybe integrate that with the businesses as well. They'll be able to offer something through this app. So I think, you know, we're all talking the same path of, you know, integrating it with our parklands, having the main streets be able to connect into through our parklands, easy access, lighting access to invite people into the precinct from the parklands. I think we've talked about that, and I think you guys are on the right path, but I can't stress enough how we really need to move forward really quickly on this. And I know we've got budget implications. I understand all that, but I don't think our businesses can afford to wait. I don't think our city can afford to wait. I don't think it's something that we can just put on the shelf and say, yep, when things get better. I think with you know, competition coming from Burnside, from the, you know, Burnside Village, you know, we've got Westfields that are gearing up for the recovery of the COVID, I'm sure, and they've got plans in place. We've got to do the same thing. We've got to really, really get in there quick. That's all I can say presently.
Thank you. Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the work. I think that's a really great capture of what I think we're all hoping for those 3 streets. I agree that the identity is really important. Absolutely, we need to make sure the stakeholders include all the stakeholders, and that includes the surrounding residents, it includes the landlords as well as the traders. I'm interested as to what data that we've got for each of the streets, particularly in terms of who they're catering to in the mainstream, whether it's, and each street is quite different, but in terms of whether it's local resident, visitor from where, and customers from where. And the reason that I say that is really from personal experience in terms of, you know, when I worked near HUTT Street, I went to HUTT Street all the time, but I would often go to Melbourne Street for dinner, or I would often go to O'Connell Street for dinner or entertainment. Like, so the reasons for going places are quite different. And part of the reason that I'm keen to understand how much of their trade is from the local residents is because there is an opportunity when we come out of this that those main streets are front and centre in terms of the opportunity around community connection. So, and there are, as we know, the more that you can actually make the street the way that the local community connect with each other and also with the traders there, it brings a certain strength and I don't know, enjoyment to the street. I'm keen when we get to it in terms of business positioning as well, that each of the streets are looked at for their identity, and that is the discussion that we can have with landlords and in terms of what that mix of unique product might look like, particularly around artisan or emerging designers and things like that. Because if it's just chains, which you can get anywhere, then we're always going to be in the same position. If it's things that have offerings that you can't get anywhere, that's obviously an attractor as well. And the last one is, I'm just going to pass on something that I've had a few people say to me from a couple of these streets actually, which was interesting that they asked for similar things, is potted colour. And by that, I mean, you know, baskets of petunias or camellias or marigolds or whatever, but potted colour, which is really simple and really easy and really cheap. actually brings, particularly as we're going to come out of this come spring, will bring also a bit of a highlight as people move through that area. Plus you can put your coffee grinds in your camellias. So good for the local cafes. So there's just a few things that I think that we could do to dress up the streets, as well as, yes, cleaning and doing all that sort of stuff, but a bit of colour and movement will go a long way to making people feel good about the streets. It's a bit like putting the piano in HUTT Street, where people were just, except for Deputy Lord Mayor, who lived above where they were playing the piano, that maybe wasn't so great. But for the people that were moving up and down the street, it was great, and the HUTT Street traders loved it. So so I look forward to what comes next. I also applaud the work that was done on Hindley Street. I think that is a fantastic case study, and understanding that we use the quick wins and the short-term improvements while still keeping our eye on the longer-term game and making sure that we have a master plan in place so that that will guide our future investment in those areas. So thank you. Look forward to the next steps.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Abrahimzadeh.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, I do want to thank administration for the very informative body of work. Shanti, Grace, Clinton, you guys and your team have done a fantastic job with this. Just to build on Councillor Kouros's comments around bringing certain works forward, I would be keen to see that as well. I'm not sure whether if members remember, about 5 or 6 weeks ago when the Premier first came to Council to give us a briefing on COVID-19, he mentioned that it would be useful for us to look at our pipeline of work and I guess use some of this work to help our recovery. And I think that will be important. So the staging of the works, I know we do have quick wins, but I guess some of the more substantial and the more significant works that are yet to be delivered later on down the track, whether if there is any possibilities of them being delivered earlier. I know that there will be financial implications. So I guess, that's something that needs to be taken into account. But other than that, a great body of work, and I look forward to seeing it evolve later on down the track.
Thank you, Councillor. Members, that was the last person on the list. Does anyone else wish to make comment? I think there's only, it's only Councillor Ho that hasn't commented. Shanti, did you wish to? Yep, I'm going to make a comment. Did you want to go now or at the end? Okay, good lip reading, excellent. Thanks guys for that presentation. That was really good. I think there's a lot of work that's been done on this so far. And I suppose the design room really showed us the extent of that. Now, I guess is the time to be going to the community. I suppose I would echo Councillor Kouros's and Councillor Abrahimzadeh's thoughts around whether or not this can be used as part of COVID recovery. I think there's a real opportunity here to pivot somewhat and leverage this work in that sense. What that looks like exactly yet is obviously yet to be seen. But I think it's too important an opportunity, and of course the imperative is there for the businesses that do reopen, and I do think most of them will, that we're supporting those businesses as much as possible. And as well, for the businesses that don't reopen and for the existing vacancies there, how can we encourage and facilitate and make it viable for businesses to then go into those spaces? I think this work puts us on the front foot somewhat, because if we're going to see, I mean, thinking about it, and look, there are many different things that are going to happen, and generally speaking, I think the economic development team needs to look at this in a more holistic sense across the entire Adelaide metro area. But if businesses are going to be falling over, once demand returns to what it was previously, there's going to be a hole there in the market. If property prices collapse, as Councillor Martin is suggesting they may, and they might not, but then you're going to have significantly cheaper rents at sites in the city. and you're going to have a hole there in the market that is going to need to be filled. I want us to be best placed to be able to activate those streets, make them attractive as we need to, get the hustle and bustle going, so that we can see new businesses come in and establish themselves in our main streets. And in doing so, we might actually reverse the trend, which has been us seeing businesses depart our main streets to either go elsewhere in the city or, more often than not, into the suburbs and out of the city altogether. So I think there's a real opportunity. In the context of the broader budget, we should consider potential for actually turbocharging some of this work, because I think you've done really good due diligence on bringing it all together, and there's a lot of information there. And depending on how this fits into COVID recovery, I think it could be a really, really useful tool in the kit. So the timing is actually very good on that. Just one comment on HUTT Street as well, echoing what Councillor Kira said. The lighting is very, very important down there. Tree pruning may help a bit. However, the issue is, particularly between Halifax and Gillies Street, there actually aren't any street lights there. You've got maybe 2 or 4 uplights in the median strip, and they don't actually, even with the tree pruning, they're not going to be projecting light onto the street and highlighting those areas, and that's a public safety concern, and it also just makes it look very dead. Obviously, there's now 3 new eateries that have opened up on HUTT Street in recent months, which is good news. But we need to make sure we're doing our bit to support them as well, generally speaking. So thank you again for your presentation. And Shanti, I'll throw over to you for some closing remarks. If I can find you. There we go. Okay.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor, and thank you, members, for your really insightful comments. A couple of things that perhaps you weren't able to gather from the material that we've shared or from the presentation tonight. So the Economic Development team is actually undertaking some work insofar as retailing and what retailing will look like into the future. So that work is informing this. However, that may need to take a bit of a segue given COVID. So no doubt they will be all over that bit of knowledge. And the other thing that I should have mentioned at the outset was we are looking at opportunities to seek funding from other sources, whether it be the state government or federal government, who knows. But we certainly have that in our line of sight in terms of an opportunity to try and deliver some of this work without having to dip into our own pockets. And lastly, I think it's really important to stress the message that council has an enormous advocacy role to play within these precincts, within each of the precincts, whether it be in the context of trying to promote development to sort of grow the population in each of these localities, so through the State Planning Commission, or whether it be through the Small Business Commissioner or any of those state government avenues. So we're consciously aware that we need to perhaps turbocharge the advocacy piece to the next level to promote these streets so that we can be better placed to support the businesses as the world reveals itself in a different suit, so to speak. So just like to thank members for your listening to our presentation. I'd like to thank Grace for all her work. And we will be coming in with a report to council, which hopefully can capture most of what we've been talking about tonight.
Thank you for that, Shanti. Members, thank you for coming this evening. With the conclusion of that presentation, I will declare this committee meeting closed. Thank you.